Before we jump into the battle, I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Theometer, aka Door, for A, partially becoming my part-time editor by volunteer, by B, taking my battle videos and putting them through post-processing and putting motion blur on them, which for those of you that are not familiar with how long that takes to do, the process itself for actually, dragging and dropping the motion blur onto the track to put it there, easy. Exporting it takes a fuck long time. Like, even with my current setup, if I wanted to export like 4 videos with motion blur, it would probably take me the better part of a day to do. But he's got, the rig of a freaking god, I guess, and he's like, I'm gonna do it for you, and if you want to keep doing it, we can do it. So let me know, guys, how you like the videos, how they look from this point forward. Otherwise, we can just kind of talk about the game right now. Why do I have so much priority? Holy crap. I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, Honchkrow has the Sucker Punch, and then Glyspot has the first impression in the Sucker Punch, and then Scizor also has the Bullet Punch, and it's like, what happened to me in a game before this that made me immediately decide to have that many priority users? Or what is happening right now to the point where my fastest thing on my team? I think that Nihilego might actually be Scarf too, so it's just like, why am I so prepared for fast? Like, Trick Room could have definitely screwed me over, but thankfully, Crispiness did not bring Trick Room. He brought just a six dudes. That's kind of how that works. Anyway, I had a lot of fun with this game, and I hope you guys will too. So we're going to jump right into it. He's going to get he's going to go ahead and lead off with Mimikyu. I'm going to go ahead and lead off with Hydreigon. I don't like this lead matchup because I don't have U-turn, so I'm just going to hard switch out immediately into Scizor as he decides to go for the Play Rough. Unfortunately, ends up missing. I say unfortunate for me as well because I can't really scout out if he's Life Orb or not or anything like that. He does turn out to be Life Orb, which it reveals itself to be later. I know I'm not taking much from Play Rough, but either way, I still wanted to, potentially be able to go for the Bullet Punch on it as well. If he stayed in, he probably would have been a red card with SD. If they like doing that early in the game, I've seen a lot of people do that. I'm not sure if that's really the best way to play it out, to maybe get early damage like that, or to just force a late game scramble. I think a late game scramble is probably the better way to do it. But to jump back to the game, I go for Bullet Punch because that's the one thing you want to do with the Mimikyu, and that's the one thing he didn't let me do for a really long time, which is pop the Disguise, because late game, a Life Orb Mimikyu with its Disguise still intact can be a very, very dangerous thing to deal with. But in the meantime, I feel really good about switching out to my Hydreigon. I had a feeling an offensive move was coming as opposed to a Willow, just because all of my special attackers happen to be resistant to fire, and all of my physical attackers do not appreciate switching in on a fire type move. So it's just like, well, you know what? I'm going to go in, I'm going to take whatever hit's going to happen here. And it turns out I don't even see Willow, I see Toxic here. Not that I'm necessarily knocking it, just on defensive Arcanine, I usually don't see Toxic. I see Willow to help out with the Intimidate and the added physical bulk that you might have going there. But we did see Burn Up there, and it did lose its typing, but the other thing about Burn Up, which they don't really, I guess, kind of, outline specifically, they might in the flavor text, I'm not 100% there, but you can't use Burn Up again until you switch out because you don't have a type to Burn Up. So it's like, well, outside of Burn Up and Flare Blitz and Toxic, I almost completely took out the Arcanine, did a decent amount of Glyspot on the switch-in, and I really do not feel like taking a first impression, so I'm going to use this opportunity to go out into my Tapu Fini, who's going to go ahead and resist both of the dual stabs going on here. The best thing that the Glyspot can do right here is probably Spikes if it has it, until I force it out with Emergency Exit. Otherwise, he can just hard switch out. I just have a clear field advantage right now, which I don't really have much I can do myself. If I have Moonblast, it's definitely a good advantage. But I don't on this set. I'm kind of a support one with Surf, Taunt, Haze, and Defog, I believe. So I'm just going to go ahead and go for a Surf. Because damage is damage, get as much damage as you can on a Glyspot. And it turns out I'm actually going to get damage on the Necrozma, but me knowing the Necrozma that I use as well as the other one that I have, the one that I use more often is just the Stealth, or what is it, the Stealth Rock Life Orb set with Moonlight and I guess, not Dual Stab, excuse me, two attacks. That's what I'm looking for, 2 attacks. But then the other utility one that I've seen before, and I think also the one I ran on Showdown, has Stealth Rock, Thunderwave, Moonlight, and Psychic, which basically means it's taunt fodder. And I think I did have a timid, I think this one is a timid Fini. I'm not sure how much that matters in this particular matchup. But being faster than it does let me taunt it, which means that a Psychic is more than likely coming. But he actually decides he doesn't like that at all and decides to go back out into his Glyspod. And here I make 2 very, very fatal errors that ultimately end up costing me my Honchkrow. First off, I was not familiar with the priority level of First Impression being much, much higher than Sucker Punch. I think somebody told me after the game it ends up being, it's either +2 or +3. I know now that it is higher than Sucker Punch, unfortunately. So I ended up taking a huge chunk of damage there. And on top of that, I try to go for the Z Mirror move just to try to kill something, because with Z Mirror move, you're going to get your +2 from the Z power, and you're potentially going to get your +1 by going for a whatever the bug mirror move happens to be. But mirror move also takes into account the effects of the move itself, in that if you try to mirror move a fake out on your second turn, it will not work. Same thing goes for Sucker Punch there, or not Sucker Punch, First Impression, I should be saying. In that I tried to mirror move First Impression on the second turn of my Pokemon being in, meaning that the Z move itself failed because the move that it was based on failed. And it makes sense, it sucks, but it does make sense. So I'm kind of learning a few things here today about Golisopod and Honchkrow in themselves that unfortunately end up costing me my Honchkrow. Useless crit is useless right there. He definitely could have gotten that at some other point in the game. But I knew I was just going to lose it to a Shadow Sneak. And here's the point in the game where we learn that it's Life Orb, because it actually hit something. Right here, I feel pretty good about going for a Swords Dance, so I decide to do that. I believe. I think I just ended up. Yeah, I did, because I was like, you know, he's gonna keep the disguise. I don't see any reason why he would, you know, if he switched it out the, you know, first 2 times, or the first time, I guess, you know, he's probably gonna switch it out now to preserve it as long as possible. But now that I am Swords Dance boosted, I'm not sure whether or not a neutral Bullet Punch is gonna be able to push the Golisopod into emergency exit range. But a +2 one does, and it's gonna force in the Garchomp. Now, with emergency exit, you do get to choose what you bring in, for those of you that have not used Golisopod. So seeing this thing come in is an immediate red flag that it's going to have Fire Blast or Fire Fang, or is going to have some sort of nasty thing to be able to deal with a Mega Scizor itself. And it turns out he happens to be a Mega, being Mega Garchomp. It does lose the speed on the first turn, which, you know, there was a few Megas that were, excuse me, that were hurt by that, namely Mega Garchomp, Mega Heracross. I think, I'm trying to remember what else kind of got the speed cut, but there's the immediate ability cut as well. Not that it really plays too much into relevance there, especially since that happened on the Switch, and he ends up switching out immediately after as well. But, you know, just food for thought if you're going to use Mega Garchomp later. You do lose the speed on your first turn now, which is a change from Gen 6 to Gen 7, as most of us are familiar with at this point, with the Megas getting their speed tiers boosted immediately, which I'm not sure what they had to do to fix it in Gen 7, but they did it, and they did it well, and it hurt some things, and it buffed some things. So right here, actually predicting me to predict, or I predict him to predict me to use the taunt again on the Necrozma, which is why I actually double surf, and I actually end up breaking the Mimikyu's disguise right here. And this is probably one of the more important turns of the game, because this immediately means that Mimikyu no longer has the one-turn defensive pressure that it applies to my team, you know, potentially later game. And it is very early in the game for the Mimikyu's disguise to get broken, so I'm actually really happy with the way that played out, even if I didn't get any extra damage on Necrozma. And on top of that, I dodged the Rogue Wood Hammer coming off of the Mimikyu. It does get that, and I had often questioned about, you know, how it does Wood Hammer, but I think it might be the tail? Question mark? I'm not 100% on that, but, you know, if you have any theories for how Mimikyu uses Wood Hammer, I am definitely all ears. I decided to go for a Bullet Punch here because now it is definitely exposed. I have no reason not to. And it turns out it does a pretty good amount of damage to the Golisopod as well. It's almost looking like it might favor a roll, but I decide I don't want to chance it. And against a Golisopod, you know, with the amount of HP that I'm at, I feel like I can comfortably get a Swords Dance up and Bullet Punch whatever wants to come in, as he ends up going for a Liquidation. And it turns out it just doesn't do as much as I thought it was going to, and that's totally fine because I can roost it off later. But you know, being up +2, I can definitely take it out there. You can argue that 2 Bullet Punches would have done the job. I just wasn't necessarily. I think did we take out the Arcanine? No, the Arcanine's at a very low amount of HP, which is why I ended up doing that. Gotcha. That makes sense for myself. But the other thing I forgot about with the fire move is Garchomp. So I was like, well, shit, I really don't feel like messing around with that. Turns out I accidentally predict the Earthquake here as well. And now I'm in a pretty good spot because I know I'm faster than Mega Garchomp, being a Hydreigon. And I can definitely go for the I think I ended up going for the Dragon Pulse here, although going for the Dark Pulse would have been pretty good middle ground because, you know, he didn't really seem like he was going to stay in as well. And then going for the Dark Pulse, you know, if that didn't have a chance to knock it out, Dark Pulse definitely would have knocked out the Necrozma on the Switch. But it turns out, you know, Dragon Pulse gets the job done, and Hydreigon actually putting in a decent amount of work, but will unfortunately die, like, you know, Honchkrow, to the Life Orb Shadow Sneak at, I believe, 17 HP as well. That's kind of interesting that both of my Dark types died to a resisted Shadow Sneak from a Mimikyu that no longer has the disguise, and the Scizor versus the Mimikyu matchup is going to happen again and again and again. As long as, you know, as long as I have my Scizor at even 1 HP, I'm going to try to keep it around for the Mimikyu, because that is the thing I need to take care of. I do get another, I do want to say that this crit ends up mattering, and you guys will actually see why right now, I believe, because I immediately go out into Gliscod. In case you're not familiar with what this spread is, this is an Assault Vest one in case he wants to go for the Fire Blast. I can take that reasonably well. I think the only thing I would have necessarily been fearing is the one thing that he was least likely to go for on a Mega Scizor, which probably would have been the Dragon move, and I think that those two have a decent amount of synergy together. I'm not sure how much the first impression would have done to the Mega Garchomp, is why I'm saying that Bullet Punch could have potentially mattered there. Now, here I'm actually pretty happy with how this turned out, because the Porygon Z is actually going to go ahead and go for the Z conversion. It's usually what they end up doing. I also had not seen a Z move at this point in the game, so I figure if it's going to be anything, it's going to be this. And there's going to be a turn where it's not going to attack, so I'm just going to go for the Liquidation to see if I can get the defense drop. And I also do have the Sucker Punch as well on this thing, so I go for Liquidation. It does right around half, but, you know, a super effective Sucker Punch will do a little bit over that, you know, not stab, but ×2, which is still nice. So we actually dispose of the Porygon Z as quickly as it comes in, and then his last one actually happens to be said Mimikyu, which where if this thing did not have, or if this thing did have its disguise, this would have worked out a lot better in his favor, but would have ultimately died to a Bullet Punch from the Scizor because he was not able to dispose of it in time. And it turns out, you know, having Gliscod and Scizor around actually did help me quite a bit, since a lot of the threats on this team turned out to be a lot faster. What with Garchomp if it wasn't a Mega, Porygon Z if things had gotten out of hand, and Mimikyu, which actually outsped a slightly decent chunk of my team. Did not speed Hydreigon, but its Hydreigon still wasn't really able to do much against it with the disguise still up. So there was a lot of points in that game live where I had to think about what I was going to do next, because the game was moving at a really brisk and refreshing pace. I'd had a lot of stall games in the stream recently, which is why I was just super excited about this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. If you did, you can leave a like rating, comment, subscribe, do your thing. You guys know how that works. And both Door and my opponent's, you know, information, as well as the song I used. I've been doing that lately, by the way. I'm putting relevant links in the description, so definitely feel free to check out all of those at the bottom. And then in terms of when I'm gonna have another video up, probably I'm aiming for 2 weeks. This will be 1 out of 2. When they go up, you know, it's gonna be anybody's guess, but it's more likely gonna be on a weekday. So I think that's all the time I have left on this track. So I'll see you guys on the next one. Later.